I want to introduce a husband who, when sent to Bunnings for a mozzie candle, one mozzie candle, comes back with Roman flares, blue tack, an extension cord, potting mix, a step ladder, secateurs, but no mozzie candle. I want to introduce my best friend, the love of my life, my companion for over 35 years, through the good times and the not so good times. A proud father of 3, an absolutely delighted and besotted grandfather, a person for whom family is the core of happiness. Let's welcome now the man who continues to fight for all Australians, often against the odds, who fights for our rights, including our rights at work, for our environment, for our security, for our prosperity, so that we can work together to seize the massive opportunities available to this country and realise our shared aspirations for an even greater Australia. Come on out, Kevin, from Queensland, and say g'day to Australia.
Well, thank you, Therese, for those words of extraordinary welcome, and for being the love and support of my life throughout the ups and downs of political life, because, as you all know, without families, we are nothing. And Albo for that warm-up of the century. Thanks, mate. Terrific. And put your hands together for this great Australian Labor team. Person for person, man for man, woman for woman, light years ahead of anything that sits opposite. Fellow Queenslanders, fellow Australians, fellow members of the great Australian Labor Party. In this election, we are now engaged in the fight of our lives. It's a fight about the values which underpin Australia's future. A fight about our vision for Australia's future. It's a fight about how we go about building Australia's future. A future for the many, not just for the few. And for those who say the fight is up, I say you haven't seen anything yet. Because we have something worth fighting for. And that's the jobs of all Australians, the pay packets of all Australians, an Australia which still believes in a fair go for all. These are the things worth fighting for. And despite everything that is thrown against us every day, I believe in this election we can prevail and we will prevail. We believe in values, values of freedom, values of compassion, values of a fair go for all. These are universal values, they are Australian values, and fundamentally they are Labor values. The values that caused our party and our movement to come into being more than a century ago. The values which inspired people to dream of a better Australia. Values which inspired women and men across the decades to build Australia's future. Values which gave us fair pay, fair conditions, and an independent umpire. Values that built the age pension. Values that built a free public hospital system. Values that built a university system accessible for all under Prime Minister Gough Whitlam. Values that built Medicare for all under Prime Minister Bob Hawke. Values that built disability care for all under Julia Gillard. And values that built superannuation for all under Prime Minister Paul Keating. My friends, these are all values worth fighting for. Values which gave every Australian access to a first-class education and first-class healthcare, rich or poor, country or city, long settled or newly arrived. Values that have also caused us as a movement to make the big calls on our nation's future, big calls on the internationalisation of our economy, big calls on our place in the region and the world. For generations, we have had the audacity to believe that through the agency of Parliament and government, that we could always build a better Australia than the one that we inherited from our forebears. That's why we're in the business of progressive government. That's why we believe in progressive politics rather than conservative politics, because we are in the business of building the house up. The Conservatives are in the business of tearing the house down. Ours is always a positive vision that points optimistically to the future. Theirs a negative vision that points back to some imagined point in a mythical past which no one can ever quite find. These have always been the competing narratives of Australian history. The Conservatives know what they are against, but they've never really seemed to work out what they're exactly for. I have never seen a decent reform that the Conservatives haven't set out to destroy. Whereas for all our faults, we are always having a go at building a better Australia. And yes, that means we don't always get it right. Yes, that means we have made mistakes, but as a highly successful migrant in his 70s told me the other day in Adelaide, Kevin, the only blokes in life who never make mistakes are those blokes who don't do anything in life. But to be fair, Mr Abbott has done a few things. He was one of Mr Howard's industrial relations ministers. He did say that work choices was the greatest reform of the Howard government. And as health minister, he did rip $1 billion out of the public hospitals of Australia. But that's just for starters. Values, my friends, are one thing. How they shape our vision for Australia's future is another. The core of our vision of the 21st century is one where every Australian should have the right to a good job, a job with fair wages and conditions. We also want an Australia where you do not live in daily fear of losing your job. But where a job is lost, we want an Australia that helps you find a new job in one of the new industries of the future. We also want an Australia with vibrant small businesses, where your small business can become a medium-sized business, and your medium-sized business can become a big business through the sheer power of your enterprise. Because if we do not have profitable businesses, we will not generate the productive jobs of the future. We also want an Australia driven by the industries of the future, by new agribusiness, by new forms of manufacturing, and new industries we haven't even dreamed of yet. And we want an Australia in which the education system delivers your kids the education, the skills and the training they need to compete with the kids of Asia and the kids of the rest of the world. That's what Labor governments do. We want an Australia where you are equipped with the best broadband technologies for the future so that you are not left behind by the rest of the world. We want an Australia where you can have confidence in a first-class hospital system, a first-class aged care system, a first-class health system that does not discriminate between rich and poor. That's what Australian Labor governments do. And we want an inclusive Australia where there is no discrimination on the basis of your race, your gender, or your sexuality. And our vision is an Australia with a clean energy future, and where Australia is playing its part to preserve the planet from the ravages of climate change, a planet that is worth inheriting for your children, your grandchildren, and my grandchildren. That's what Labor governments do. And we want an Australia which is confident of its place in the region and the world, and where our voice is respected in the leading councils of the world. And above all, we want an Australia where we bring people together around one negotiating table, government and businesses and unions, rather than fighting pitched battles which take us nowhere, other than divide our country, rather than bring our country back together. That's what Australian Labor governments do. So, my friends, these are the contours of our vision for Australia's future. A strong Australia, a secure Australia, a sustainable Australia, where we never throw the fair go out the back door. And it is this vision we put with confidence before the Australian people for this election. We are in the business of building the nation's future, whereas Mr Abbott believes in $70 billion worth of cuts for the nation's future. Cuts that will hurt your jobs, cuts that will go to your schools, cuts that will go to your hospital, and cuts that will cost your standard of living. And $70 billion of massive cuts risk throwing the entire economy into recession because we still live through fragile global economic times. As Prime Minister of Australia, my job is to protect your jobs, your pay, and your basic conditions. That's why we worked so hard during the global financial crisis, while other economies fell like dominoes around the world. That's why we acted decisively to stimulate the economy, to protect the jobs of all Australians, to avoid the mass unemployment we saw everywhere around the world. And the result? Nearly 1 million jobs added in Australia since we assumed office. And that's why we acted to guarantee the savings deposits of all Australians when banks were collapsing around the world and people were losing their deposits hand over fist. And we have done all the above with among the lowest debt and deficit levels in the world, and for the first time ever we've secured Australia a AAA credit rating from all three international agencies. So none of this nonsense on economic management, Mr. Abbott. Look at the facts and look at the figures. But with the end of the China mining boom, our economic circumstances are changing, and we must now manage the next great transition in our economy so that we don't have all our eggs in just one basket. That's why we must continue to support the small business sector in our country as well, because from small businesses, big businesses grow. I'm announcing today a major small business tax boost from our next term in office. If the government is re-elected, from next Saturday, our small business tax boost will provide an upfront tax deduction for small businesses when they buy new equipment worth up to $10,000 to help small businesses with the cash flow. The combined tax benefit of this and other measures which exist for small business adds up to more than $5.4 billion. Mr. Abbott may think he can get away with his $5.4 billion hit on small business. I intend to stand up for Australian small business with our $4.4 billion immediate tax break, because I want to help Australian small businesses succeed. Big business is also a critical part of our nation's future. Tens of billions of dollars are being invested in projects right around Australia, in mines, in ports, in roads and major infrastructure investments. Yet too often, these multinational firms will develop these projects and default to bringing in overseas suppliers rather than using Australian suppliers and Australian skills. Today I announce that a re-elected Labor government will legislate to require all projects worth $300 million or more to adopt Australian industry participation plans. This measure is expected to generate up to $624 million in extra work for Australian industry and jobs each year. I have always been passionate about education around the single vision that we must nurture the best trained, best educated, best skilled workforce anywhere in the world. We've been building this vision brick by brick over the last 5 years, from early childhood education through our primary schools into our secondary schools and our universities, where as of today we have 190,000 more kids at university than the day we assumed office at the end of 2007. There's one remaining element of the education and training system that has not been dealt with in our reform program, and that's TAFE. We've increased the number of apprentices in training, 50,000 more apprentices and trainees in training than 5 years ago. But Australia must do better. If re-elected, I will increase the tools for your trade payment to apprentices to $6,000 to help buy their first set of tools. This would give 70,000 Australian apprentices more cash in their pockets to buy the tools that they need. I want to help young Australian apprentices to get started in their trade with a grant, while Mr. Abbott instead simply offers you a $20,000 loan. That is a $20,000 debt hanging over your head before you even get started in your trade. I believe we've got our priorities right. But Australia's TAFE system also has to do better to support the apprentices of the future. Commonwealth annual funding for vocational education and training has increased by 25% in real terms since we came to office, with over $19 billion invested over the last 5 years. which is why it is worrying in the national interest to see Liberal state governments making TAFE cuts and jacking up fees across the nation. We have seen it in Victoria. We have seen it in Western Australia. We are seeing it in Queensland, where we see TAFE starting to wither on the vine. This is not acceptable to an Australian Labor government. I will simply not stand idly by and continue to hand over Commonwealth funds to state governments to run TAFE colleges while those state governments cut their own TAFE funding. It's not on. The TAFE system has a proud history in Australia, and I intend to ensure that TAFE has a proud future in Australia as well. I announced today that a re-elected Labor government will require that state governments maintain and grow their funding of TAFE. Second, if those conditions are not met by 1 July 2014, we will move to provide Commonwealth funding directly to individual TAFE colleges. And third, if state governments frustrate this ambition, then from 2015, the Australian government will begin directing its own TAFE funding into a new TAFE Australia network directly funded by the Commonwealth. Given that the Commonwealth's annual funding for skills and training to the states and territories amounts to $7 billion over the budget cycle, properly directed Commonwealth funding would in time build a new TAFE Australian network that would rival the great polytechnics of France and Germany. Friends, we must also continue to tackle the challenge of unemployment by bringing together our vast employment services system and our training and apprenticeship system across the nation. Today I announce a major reform to the system through a new Jobs, Training and Apprenticeships Guarantee and a new institution, Jobs and Training Australia, that will bring together for the first time the employment services and training systems of Australia. This guarantee has three core components. Number one, if you lose your job, then within 2 days of registering with an unemployment services provider, you will get a return to work plan relevant to the jobs in your local area. Number two, job seekers will then be guaranteed access to either a publicly funded apprenticeship or traineeship at Certificate 3 level and relevant local employer demand. Or if they already have a qualification, they can access a vocational education and training loan for over $90,000 to acquire other qualifications. Or they can access a university place. That's what Labor governments do. And number three, through strong leadership of local jobs and training boards, Jobs and Training Australia will be best able to offer a real job relevant to their skills locally, regionally or nationally, drawing on the Jobs and Training Australia network. That's what Labor governments do. Job Services Australia is not directly linked at present to the apprenticeship and traineeship providers, both government and non-government across Australia. This link must now be joined, and that is what this reform is all about. My friends, this election is a clear choice about Australia's future. We believe in building Australia's future. whereas Mr Abbott believes in $70 billion worth of cuts to your future. Cuts that will go to your jobs, your schools and your hospitals. We believe in building and protecting the jobs of the future. Mr Abbott believes in massive cuts to jobs, and if you doubt any word that I say, look very closely at a man called Campbell Newman here in Queensland. With Campbell Newman, you've had the entree. If Mr Abbott's elected, you get the main course. Every Australian and every Queenslander should pay close attention to what has happened here. $70 billion is more money than the Commonwealth pays to the states in hospital funding over 4 years. Yet $70 billion is the scale of massive cuts that Mr Abbott and his shadow ministers have spoken of. Or put it another way, if Mr Abbott cut just $20 billion of his $70 billion, it's the equivalent of the following: closing 5,000 hospital beds, sacking 1 in 20 teachers, and on top of that, cutting 5% away from family payments. We believe also in building the education system of the future through our $15 billion of additional investment in the Better Schools plan. Whereas Mr Abbott has stated he will cut $8 billion from the Better Schools plan. We are building the health and hospital system for the future with an additional $19 billion investment, and by restoring the Commonwealth's overall investment in hospital funding to 50%, when Mr Abbott slashed the Commonwealth's share, creating a funding crisis for our public hospital system. And we are building the National Broadband Network for all Australians. The National Broadband Network for all Australians. Whereas Mr Abbott will cut that network to pieces, providing fibre optic cable only to those who can afford it. We're providing fibre optic cable for free to your household or your small business because we believe that superfast broadband is a universal right for all Australians for the 21st century. Let's look at this through the prism of history. In the 19th century, all Australians were given the right to a universal postal service. In the 20th century, the right to a universal telephone service. In the 21st century, Australians demand the right to a universal broadband service. That's what Labor governments do. Mr Abbott will cut into your family budget by charging you up to $5,000 to get a connection because he regards broadband not as a right, but as a privilege. We are also building a clean energy future to act on climate change for all Australians through our $10 billion Clean Energy Finance Corporation. Whereas Mr Abbott has said he will abolish the Clean Energy Finance Corporation because at the end of the day, you know it, everybody knows it. Mr Abbott, at the end of the day, does not believe in climate change. We believe in helping Australian families with cost of living pressures by keeping interest rates low, increasing the childcare rebate from 30% to 50%, and providing 1.3 million Australian families with a school kids bonus each year. Whereas Mr Abbott says he does not care about cost of living pressures because he's going to abolish the school kids bonus altogether and then review the goods and services tax, which hits the bottom line for every Australian family when they go to the shops. We believe in the Fair Work Act and the Fair Work system, which protects people's penalty rates and overtime. Whereas Mr Abbott says he will change the Fair Work Act, and his industrial relations spokesman says that these protections can be removed. We're in the building business, Mr Abbott is in the cutting business. And if there's no greater illustration of wrong priorities, it's Mr Abbott's unaffordable, unfair, economically reckless, $22 billion paid parental leave scheme to provide $75,000 for millionaires to have a baby. This has been Mr Abbott's one big idea for this campaign. I'm sorry, Mr Abbott has had two big ideas. The other one has been to change his turn the boats back policy into a buy back the boats policy, which would lead to the biggest boom in the Indonesian boat building industry in history. Another big policy idea from Mr. Tony Abbott. I believe these sorts of policies say everything about Mr. Abbott's priorities, his judgment, and I believe his temperament when it comes to the responsibilities of high office. How could anyone support a profligate scheme which provides $75,000 handouts to millionaires when they don't need it, and to have it paid for by everyone else in this room today through the taxes they pay? My friends, this is a challenge for us all for the future. This is a time for our election and a time when we must therefore look carefully at the priorities of the future. I believe that we face real challenges, real choices in the critical week which lies ahead, as Australians consider how they vote. It is important for them to know precisely what these alternatives are. Our plan for building Australia's future is clear. Mr. Abbott's plan for cutting the future to ribbons remains hidden. That's because he knows that if the Australian people knew which jobs, schools and hospitals he would cut, then the people would be too frightened to vote for him. So I would simply say this to the Australian people. If you don't understand how Mr. Abbott's $70 billion worth of cuts will affect your job, your school and your hospital, then don't vote for him. If you are still feeling uneasy about voting for Mr. Abbott, there is a good reason for that, because he's asking you to buy something sight unseen. You, the Australian people, have had a long time to get to know Mr. Abbott over his 20 years in the Australian Parliament. But if you still have doubts about him, don't vote for him. If Mr. Abbott wins, he says there will be real change. Well, there'll be real change, all right, because choosing his real change means choosing massive cuts to your schools, your hospitals, your broadband, your jobs and your pay packets. To conclude, to those who say that Mr. Abbott has already won this election, I say this: never, ever, ever underestimate the fighting spirit of the Australian Labor Party. And never ever underestimate my fighting spirit as your Prime Minister. I've been in tougher spots than this and have come from behind before. Or as one kid said to me in Tassie the other day, "Kevin, we want you to become the comeback kid for Australia." The truth is, there is so much worth fighting for. Fighting to protect your jobs, fighting to protect your schools, fighting to protect your hospitals, fighting to protect your national broadband network, fighting to protect your clean energy future, fighting to protect a future for us all. So we will fight this election until the last vote is cast on Saturday night. Friends, I believe we can prevail, and I believe in the end we will prevail. We'll fight for our values. We'll fight for our vision. We will fight for our Labor project. And we will fight for the heart and soul of the Australia we all want for the future, for all members of this great family that we call the nation Australia.